My dear, when people talk about love between a mother and daughter, they always say it's unbreakable. They say no one can ever come between them. But life has its own cruel ways of proving you wrong. I raised my daughter, Emily, with every ounce of love in my heart. Her father passed away when she was just 5. I was both her mother and her father. I worked 2 jobs, mornings at a bakery, nights cleaning offices, just to make sure she never went to bed hungry. Every dollar I earned, I spent thinking about her future. I didn't buy new clothes for years, but she always had the best dresses in school. When she got older, she started calling me her best friend. Oh, how proud that made me. Every night we would sit on the porch, drink tea, and she would tell me her dreams. About how one day she would buy me a little house by the sea, where I could rest after all the hard years. But dreams, they change. Especially when someone new enters your child's world. She met a man named Ryan, handsome, charming, rich. I could see the way her eyes lit up around him, and I wanted to be happy for her. I really did. But something inside me, a mother's instinct, whispered that he wasn't as kind as he looked. The first time I met him, he barely looked at me. He called me ma'am like I was some stranger. I tried to laugh it off, thinking maybe he was just shy. But later, I found out he didn't want Emily to visit me so often. He said I influenced her too much. Imagine that, a mother influencing her own daughter too much. First, Emily defended me. Ryan, she's my mom, she said. But as months passed, she started visiting less. Calls became shorter. And when I'd call her, she would sound tired, distant. I never stopped praying for her. Every night I lit a candle, asking God to protect her heart and guide her back to me. Then one evening she called. Her voice was shaky. Mom, I need a favor. Can I use the house papers for a loan? Ryan's starting a new business, and we just need some collateral for a few months. I was shocked. Emily, that house is all I have. If something goes wrong. Mom, please, she interrupted. You always said you trust me, right? Please. Don't you trust me? Course I did. She was my daughter. So I agreed. I gave her the house papers. Months went by. Then I started receiving letters from the bank. They were hard to understand, full of legal words, but I knew enough to realize something was wrong. When I called Emily, she said she'd handle it. But the fear in her voice told me she had no idea what to do. One morning I decided to visit her house. Maybe talk things out calmly. When I reached, she opened the door looking startled, like she'd seen a ghost. And behind her stood Ryan, smirking, holding a glass of whiskey. I said softly, Emily, we need to talk. Ryan chuckled. About what? The house that's now technically ours. My heart dropped. What do you mean ours? Before I could say another word, Emily turned around, her face red, her eyes full of tears, and suddenly, she slapped me. Once, and then, again. I lost count after 10. Ryan just stood there watching with a grin. My own daughter, the child I carried in my arms, whose tears I once wiped, hit me 30 times in front of her husband. Each slap wasn't just pain on my cheek. It was pain deep inside my soul. I didn't even raise my hands to stop her. I just looked at her and whispered, Why, my baby? And she screamed, Because you're ruining my life. That night, I walked home alone in the rain. I didn't even feel the cold. Felt empty. I sat on my porch till sunrise, asking myself, what did I do wrong? Was I too loving? Too protective? Tell me, my dear, if your own child ever raised a hand on you, what would you do? Would you forgive them? Or walk away forever? Comment below what your heart would do, because sometimes, forgiveness feels heavier than revenge. And stay till the end, my dear, because you'll want to hear how this mother found her strength again. I didn't sleep for 3 days after that. But then something inside me changed. I realized if my daughter could take everything from me without remorse, maybe it was time I took back my life. So when she and Ryan went away for work one week, I went to the bank. And that's where I discovered something that changed everything. When I walked into the bank that morning, I felt like an old woman who had finally lost everything. My steps were slow, my hands trembling. The smell of polished floors and coffee filled the air, and everyone seemed too busy to notice me. Just another wrinkled face with a file clutched to her chest. I went to the counter and said softly, "My name is Margaret Thompson. I need to ask about my house papers. My daughter, Emily, used them for a loan." The young man at the counter looked at me politely. "Of course, ma'am. Do you have the account number?" I handed him the documents I had. He typed something into his computer and then paused. His eyes lifted toward me, a strange hesitation in his expression. "Mrs. Thompson, are you aware your property is listed under Mr. and Mrs. Ryan Carter's joint ownership?" I felt the air leave my lungs. No, that can't be true. That's my house. My husband built it before he died." He swallowed hard. "Ma'am, according to these documents, the title was transferred 2 months ago. There's also an active foreclosure warning because the loan hasn't been paid in full." My vision blurred. I had to hold the counter to stop myself from falling. My daughter. She didn't just use my house as collateral. She transferred it into her and Ryan's name. I walked out of the bank like a ghost, my mind blank. The world around me was still. Cars passed, people laughed, but everything sounded far away. I went home, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the family photos on the wall. There was one picture. Emily as a child, hugging me tightly at the beach, both of us laughing with ice cream melting down our fingers. I touched that frame and whispered, "Where did you go, my little girl?" For the next few days I didn't cry. I didn't even speak much. I just watched the clock tick and thought about what Ryan had said. The house that's technically ours. But one evening something shifted inside me. I realized I could either die with a broken heart, or I could live with dignity. My husband used to say, "Maggie, never let anyone steal your peace, not even family." Those words echoed in my mind again and again. So I decided to fight, not with anger but with silence and patience. I called an old friend, George. He used to work in real estate before he retired. I asked him if he could check the property records for me. He came over the next morning, carrying his dusty briefcase. He spent hours on the computer and finally looked up, sighing. "Maggie, the property was indeed transferred illegally, but you're still listed as the original owner on an older deed. If you can prove coercion or forgery, you might get it back." That night I didn't sleep. I thought about every slap, every tear, every humiliation. And by dawn I had made my decision. I wouldn't beg for justice. I'd take it with my own hands. A week later, when Emily and Ryan went to work, I quietly packed a small bag and went to the county office. I met a lawyer named Anna, a kind woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She listened carefully and said, "Mrs. Thompson, I'll help you. But you must be very careful. If you want to sell that house before they notice, we need to act fast." Sell the house. The very place I raised my daughter. The home where every brick held a memory. The kitchen where I taught her how to bake cookies. The garden where her father planted roses for her. My heart broke just thinking about it. But love had turned to betrayal. And sometimes, my dear, even the warmest heart must turn cold to survive. Anna worked quickly. Since the original deed still carried my name, she found a legal loophole that allowed me to sell the property as the original owner before the forged papers took full effect. I knew time was short. If Emily and Ryan returned early, everything would fall apart. The night before the sale, I walked through the house one last time. My footsteps echoed in the empty hall. I ran my fingers along the walls, whispering memories to the air. The first Christmas tree, Emily's laughter when she learned to ride her bike, the smell of pancakes on Sunday mornings. And then I whispered, "Goodbye." The next day I signed the papers. The buyer was a kind couple who had recently lost their home in a fire. They were so grateful, and I thought maybe this house would finally hold love again, not greed. When the money was transferred to my account, I didn't feel joy. I felt peace, a quiet, sad kind of peace. I moved into a small cottage near the sea, just like Emily once promised me. Only this time she wasn't the one who gave it to me. I gave it to myself. A week later Emily called. Her voice was sharp. "Mom, someone broke into our house. All the furniture's gone. What did you do?" I took a deep breath and said softly, "It wasn't your house anymore, darling. I sold it." There was silence, then shouting, crying, disbelief. She screamed that I had ruined her life. Ryan called me names I won't repeat. But I stayed calm and said, "No, Emily. You ruined mine first." I hung up, turned off my phone, and sat by the window. The sea breeze brushed against my face, and for the first time in years I felt free. Still, freedom doesn't erase love. Every night I look at her photo and pray. Not for her forgiveness, but for her peace. Because a mother's heart never truly stops loving, even when it's shattered. I thought that would be the end of our story, but life, it wasn't finished with me yet. A month later, I received a letter in the mail. From Emily. It wasn't angry. It wasn't apologetic either. It was something else entirely. The letter arrived on a gray Tuesday morning. The sky looked heavy, like it was holding back tears. I remember standing by my cottage window when I heard the mailman's footsteps on the gravel. When I opened the mailbox, there it was. A white envelope, slightly crumpled, with my daughter's handwriting on it. For a long moment I couldn't move. My hands trembled as I held it. I ran my fingers over her name. Emily Carter. How strange. Seeing my own child's name made my heart race with both love and fear. I sat down on the couch, the sound of the waves whispering outside, and slowly tore the envelope open. Inside was a letter, 2 pages long. Her handwriting was shaky, like she'd written it in a rush. It began with, "Mom, I don't know if you'll even read this, but I need to tell you the truth." My chest tightened. She went on, explaining that Ryan had forced her to take the house papers. He'd told her if she didn't, he'd leave her, that she was nothing without him. She wrote about the first time he raised his voice at her, and then his hand. She said she had hidden bruises, smiled through pain, and lied to everyone, even me. "I thought if I gave him what he wanted, he'd love me again," she wrote. "But every day he hated me more. That night when you came to the house, I didn't slap you because I wanted to. I did it because he told me to. He said if I didn't, he'd walk out and never come back. And I was too weak, Mom. I was too weak to lose him." Tears streamed down my face as I read those words. Each line felt like a knife, but not because of anger. Because of how much pain my little girl had been hiding. I could see her, standing there with fear in her eyes, doing something that broke her own soul just to please the wrong man. She continued, "After you sold the house, Ryan lost it. He hit me again. Harder this time. He screamed that I'd ruined him, that it was all my fault. And then he left. He took everything and disappeared." I put my hand over my mouth, trying to breathe. "My baby. My Emily." Her letter ended with words I'll never forget. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even deserve to ask. But I want you to know, Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for that night. For those 30 slaps. I wish I could take them back, every single one. I don't have anyone left now, and I don't know where to go. But I keep remembering your words, that a mother's love never dies. I hope somewhere in your heart that's still true." The page was stained with small circles, her tears. I pressed the paper to my chest and cried. Not the loud kind of cry. The kind that breaks silently deep inside until you can hardly breathe. That day, I sat by the sea for hours. The waves were rough, crashing against the shore like my heart. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to give her the best of everything, and how it all came down to this moment. A broken letter from a broken daughter. And you know, my dear, forgiveness is a strange thing. It's not about saying, "It's okay." It's about saying, "I understand your pain." That night I made 2 cups of tea, one for me, one for her. I placed her cup across the table and spoke softly into the empty chair, as if she could hear me. "Emily," I whispered, "you hurt me more than anyone ever could. But I see now you were hurting too. Maybe we both were." I couldn't sleep that night. I kept hearing her words. "I don't have anyone left. And my heart, stubborn as always, refused to let her face that alone. The next morning I packed a small bag and took the first bus to the city. I didn't know where she was, but I remembered her workplace, a small design studio downtown. I walked through the streets until I found it. When I stepped inside, the receptionist looked up. "Can I help you, ma'am?" I said. "I'm looking for Emily Carter." Her expression softened. "She doesn't work here anymore. She quit last week. I think she moved into a shelter." My knees went weak. Shelter. My daughter, who once lived in a house full of love and laughter, now had nowhere to go. I thanked the woman and left. The city felt colder that day. I walked for hours, asking anyone I could if they'd seen her. Finally, a kind man outside a cafe told me about a women's shelter a few blocks away. When I reached the small brick building, I stood at the door for a long time, afraid. What if she didn't want to see me? What if she still hated me? But then I remembered, I'm her mother. And a mother never stops knocking on her child's door. I went inside. The woman at the front desk asked who I was visiting. "My daughter," I said softly. "Her name's Emily Carter." She smiled gently. "Room 12. My hands shook as I walked down the narrow hallway. I stopped outside room 12. The door was half open. Inside I saw her, sitting on the bed staring at the wall, her face pale and tired. I whispered, "Emily." She turned slowly, and when her eyes met mine, everything stopped. For a second we just stared, a mother and daughter, separated by pain but tied by blood. Then she stood up, her lips trembling, and said, "Mom." And that was it. I walked forward and she ran into my arms. We both cried, years of hurt pouring out in that one embrace. I didn't need an apology. I just needed to feel her heartbeat again. "Shoo," I whispered, stroking her hair. "It's okay, baby. You're safe now." And for the first time in so long I felt something I thought I'd lost forever. Hope. That night Emily and I stayed up talking for hours. The small lamp in the corner of the room flickered softly, casting golden light over her face. She looked fragile, like a little girl again, not the woman who once slapped her mother in anger. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her hands trembling as she held mine. She told me everything, every dark detail. How Ryan had controlled her, from the clothes she wore to the friends she kept. How he'd used love as a weapon, twisting her mind until she believed she was nothing without him. "He said you were the reason I was weak," she whispered. "He said you made me soft. That's why that night I stopped her gently, pressing my finger to her lips. "Shoo, my dear. You don't have to explain anymore. I know." And I did know. Because sometimes, people hurt the ones who love them most when they can't face the truth about themselves. We sat in silence for a while, the sound of distant rain outside mixing with the rhythm of our breathing. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not a grown woman, not a victim, but the same little girl who used to fall asleep in my lap after bedtime stories. She whispered, "Mom, why didn't you hate me?" I smiled sadly. "Because love doesn't disappear, Emily. It just hides when it's wounded. But it's still there waiting." Her tears fell again. She rested her head on my shoulder and I held her close, my heart both aching and healing at once. The next morning I brought her to my cottage by the sea. It was small but warm. Sunlight poured through the windows, and the sound of waves filled the silence. I made her pancakes the way I used to when she was a child. She smiled faintly and said, "They still taste the same." That day felt like the beginning of something new. Fragile but real. She started helping me around the house, cleaning, cooking, even planting flowers in the garden. Every evening we'd walk along the beach, and sometimes she'd just take my hand and say nothing. We didn't need words anymore. But healing isn't a straight path. Some nights I'd hear her crying in her room, whispering Ryan's name in her sleep. The wounds he left weren't just on her skin, they were carved deep into her heart. I knew I couldn't take her pain away. But I could remind her of who she really was, strong, kind, and full of light. One morning as we sat on the porch drinking tea, she said quietly, "Mom, I want to go to the police." I want to tell them what Ryan did. Felt proud. My little girl was finally choosing herself. So we did. It wasn't easy. She trembled as she told her story. The abuse, the manipulation, the lies. But I was right there beside her, holding her hand. When the police officer said Ryan was already under investigation for fraud, I saw relief wash over her face. A month later we got the news. Ryan had been arrested. He'd been living under a fake name, running scams in other states. Emily cried when she heard, but not from sadness, from release. That night she looked at me and said, "You were right, Mom. Love shouldn't hurt. It should heal." I nodded, tears in my eyes. It took us both too long to learn that lesson. Life slowly found its rhythm again. Emily got a new job at a local art gallery. She started painting, something she hadn't done since she was a teenager. Her hands, once shaking from fear, now moved with confidence and grace. I watched her paint sunsets, oceans, and sometimes mothers holding daughters. One day she handed me a small canvas. On it was a picture of us, sitting together by the sea, holding hands. At the bottom she had written in small letters, "Forgiven but never forgotten." I cried, holding that painting like it was gold. Because that's what forgiveness really is. Not erasing the past, but transforming it into something that no longer hurts to touch. Months passed. My hair turned whiter, my steps slower, but my heart. Oh, my heart was lighter than it had been in years. Sometimes Emily would ask me to tell her stories about when she was little. And sometimes I'd tell her the same ones she'd already heard 100 times. We'd laugh, cry, and fall asleep on the couch, the sound of waves whispering through the open window. You know, my dear, life doesn't always give you happy endings. But it gives you peaceful ones, if you're brave enough to forgive and strong enough to let go. I often sit on the porch now, looking out at the sea, thinking about everything that's happened. The slaps, the betrayal, the house, the letter. And how, somehow, all that pain led us back to love. Sometimes my neighbors come by and ask how I managed to forgive my daughter after everything. I just smile and say, because one day you might need forgiveness too. And when that day comes, you'll understand. Emily visits me every weekend now. She brings me fresh flowers and groceries, just like I once did for my mother. And every time she hugs me goodbye, I feel that same warmth, the kind only a mother and daughter can share after walking through fire together. Last Sunday as we watched the sunset, she said softly, "Mom, I still can't believe you sold the house." I laughed. Well, it's funny, isn't it? Losing everything gave us back what mattered most. She smiled, leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "Thank you for never giving up on me." And I told her the truth. "I almost did, Emily. But God reminded me, you're still my child." So, my dear, if you're listening to my story tonight, maybe you're a mother who's been hurt or a daughter who's made mistakes, remember this. Time can break hearts, but love can stitch them back together. Slowly, quietly, beautifully. And if your loved one is still alive, call them. Tell them you forgive them. Or tell them you're sorry. Because one day you won't have the chance. I've learned that forgiveness isn't weakness, it's freedom. And now, every wave that touches this shore reminds me of that truth. Because no matter how hard life hits you, even 30 times in a row, love somehow always finds its way back home. If this story touched your heart, my dear, don't forget to subscribe and share it, because maybe someone out there needs to hear that forgiveness can heal even the deepest wounds. Broken Heart Tulip.